Hi guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. We help Muslims and non-Muslims alike to understand and handle Islam in the 21st century. We consider ourselves to be decent human beings, so we condemn categorically any abuse, oppression, misogyny, slavery, violence, anything like that. We do embrace, however, free speech and also criticism, even if it is directed at us, if it is factual and constructive criticism. We focus on Islam exclusively. So if you're curious about anything Islam, you've come to the right place. Now, we don't attack, which is aggressive, destructive, and antagonistic, neither Islam nor Muslims. We ask questions and show facts. We refute false claims and present the reality of Islam, which is political Islam. We inspect, investigate, research, analyze, and then report and critique on Islam, the ideology, not the people. Now, the live stream goes to YouTube and Facebook, and there are three ways that you can participate in this. Either you join us in the live written chat, you can join the panel during the live show, or later on watch and comment the archive. And anyone can join to comment, critique, contribute, or question. This is not a Dawa channel with censorship. Don't go to Patreon, don't go to PayPal. Everything here is free. The way we work is usually we have some news, some Krazy Komments, a segment where we go and read the Quran, and then a discussion on the theme of the month, followed by integrating the live chat, ending with a Hadith of the week. If this is not enough Islam for you, there's still the Discord channel where you can discuss with us without anything being recorded. See you later and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show. Well, hello everybody. It is Friday again. Today is the 16th of July, 2021, and we are going to be discussing, surprise, surprise, Islam. Now, I'm lying in the intro because at the moment I cannot go and stream to Facebook due to my naughty. Okay, hang on, naughty.
You naughty. You teasing me, you naughty.
So this is my naughty behavior, and if you look, this is a list of all the things I did wrong. So according to this, it's hate speech and harassment and bullying, and there's another one underneath the banner which I think is also saying harassment and bullying. So I don't remember any of these, to be quite honest. I don't know how on the November 1st one I got two at the same time for some odd reason. One of them I happen to know is an autocorrect mistake where it corrected a spelling mistake, which I wanted to say you guys are pathetic because they were talking about accepting slavery and as the Islamic slavery being much better than all other slavery. And then at the end of the discussion, I gave up and I said, you guys are pathetic. How can you go and accept slavery? But it corrected it. You gays are pathetic. How can you accept slavery? So even though it didn't make sense, the AI, the algorithm said, well, somebody is saying gays are pathetic. You're not allowed to do that. So, hate speech. This is the one on July 8th. So no, hang on. It's the opposite way around. It must be the one underneath here, which is the one on hate speech, which I did like a year ago. Anyway, so I don't even know these things. The funny thing is Muslims bait you, all right? They make some outrageous comment, and when you say, listen, this is really stupid, boof, they report you, and then this gets good. So I'm banned on Facebook for, what we call it, 30 days. And this is why we cannot go and we cannot stream to Facebook at the moment, unfortunately. But who is not banned and who is up and well and alive and kicking is Mr. Rob Speakers. How are you, sir? How are you doing this beautiful Friday?
Yeah, good evening, Stops. Good evening to everybody who's listening. Yeah, I'm pretty good. It's wonderful weather out here, one of the hottest days of the year here in the UK. Sunshine all day, which is not all that often. So it's been a pretty good day.
Well, actually, it's 19.3 outside, and it's not raining because there's been a lot of rainfall in Western Europe at the moment on the mainland. and it's been quite chaotic. In Germany, I hear they're missing 1,000 people. So there, the rains must have been like really, really heavy. Now, I didn't get much of this, so I don't know how bad it can be. I cannot imagine this, but it must have been quite horrific. And welcome to the wonderful people in the chat. Thank you very much to you guys. You are really hardcore fans, even though, because we're approaching now the holiday season. So what we're thinking of doing is just shutting down during the holiday, because it's going to be difficult between Rob and me. And we never know when Mustafa or Nikos or somebody else is going to be here. So it's probably easier just to shut down for a month or two during the holidays, and then see when we can get together again. And also the other thing is we're running out of topics, okay? We're not having much impact on Muslims. We're not having much impact on anybody. We're not discussing anything new. And to make this only into a video review channel is also a bit silly, especially since we're running out of videos, because everybody, well, everybody, I mean, the Muslim apologists that we're talking about usually are not really into the format that, you know, you can easily go and critique. You need to do it in a video where you need to take bits and pieces out. Otherwise it gets, you know, far too long. So if anybody has an idea how to solve this, or what we can do, or what the solution is to the drought that we're seeing at the moment, because there's nobody who's, you know, giving us any worthwhile arguments or something. It's all about feelings. And, you know, that's very difficult to talk about, in my eyes anyway. So if anybody has ideas, please let us know. We haven't yet decided. We need to discuss this with Mustafa and Nick, and see if somebody wants to, you know, stand in and take over, or we don't know what's going to happen. So be ready for that. As for today, we're going to, you know, do the usual thing. So I'm going to kick it off with an inspirational poster. Please comment on this. Sell this life for the next, and you win both of them. Sell the next life for this life, I mean, and you lose both of them. What is your your immediate comment?
Pretty immoral thought. Why would you want to sell this life? It's the only life you know you're going to get. The other life is based on trust. I'm always going to go with the one that I know exists to the highest level that I'm able to, and not gamble with something that might not exist. But even if it did, even if another life did exist, why would I need to sell this life? I mean, that's utterly immoral. Live this life to the full, make the greatest impact, live the best life, make a lot of money, you know, impact a lot of lives, live whatever the best life. This whole idea of a test is just obviously ridiculous, right? It's an unfalsifiable claim, because all I have to ask a Muslim is, you know, what would it look like such that you could observe that life is not a test? And he might try and say, well, hang on, yeah, if you lived a luxury life, if you're a billionaire. And I say, but how do you know that's not a test? You'd have no way to say it isn't, right? So everything for them is a test. And so when you have no way to ascertain whether it's true, then obviously you don't have a good reason to believe it. And you've got no way to check whether your thinking or your beliefs, in fact, track reality, if you've got no way to falsify it. So, A, I think it's immoral, and B, you know, if it were the case, then that wouldn't stop you living this life to the fullest anyway.
Yeah, also, my main issue with this is that I think you should focus on this life and see what good you can do here. Now, if one of the gods exists and is actually a benign and merciful God, then if you focus on doing the best that you possibly can for everybody, for your family, for others around you, for friends and family, or whatever, then there's no way that you can go wrong. Now, if there is no God, well, then you've just, you know, done something good, and you fulfilled a very good, you know, reason to be on this life, on this planet, in this life. And if so, you know, it's a win-win. If there is a God, you win. If there isn't, you also win. So what they are doing is they're saying, no, you have to assume that there is a God. You have to presuppose that there's a God, and you have to presuppose it is this specific God who is asking you to sell this life for an afterlife for which there is no evidence. So you're doing everything on faith, and the chances that, you know, it's the Pascal thing. The chances that this is going to be the same thing, the same the God that you think is the one that you want is pretty remote. So, yeah. Okay, so I thought this is quite bad. Now, in the news, I've picked two articles. One is that an EU court has ruled that employers can sack women for wearing hijab at work, raising concerns over Islamophobia in Europe. Now, this is quite silly. What has actually happened is that the EU court has decided that companies can prohibit or can stop the outward display of political and religious symbols. So it is not that employers can sack women. No, it is in general. It involves anybody and everybody. You can't go with a swastika around your arm and go to work, or if you are a I don't know, in America you call it bipartisan because they only have like two parties who are actually doing anything. That if you are a company who is not dependent on any kind of political work, you can stop your employees to go and proclaim their view. If you are a right-winger, you can't go there and say everybody needs to be right-wing, and if not, you're not going to be promoted or something. So what they want to stop is any kind of political and religious kind of background to base any decisions on that. So if somebody doesn't like female Muslims, then yes, then the company can go and say, look, to stop this or to curb this or to nip this in the bud, no religious symbols are allowed, which is the case in most countries on this planet. Like in the US, you even have isn't it? Exactly. In America, you have this in the Constitution, where the government is not allowed to promote any one religion, which is why there's a very strong case being made there that they're not allowed to have nativity scenes. They're not allowed to have the 10 Commandments on courthouses and things like that, because that would be propagating Christianity, which they're not allowed to do. And this is a huge issue in America, where the Christians believe that they own the country and they can do as they please. And if they want to put the 10 Commandments on the courthouse, they are free to do so. And then the Constitution comes along and says, you're not allowed to do that. And then there's a huge outcry. And then because you're not allowed to put the nativity scene, in other words, Jesus in the manger and things like that, you're not allowed to put that outside the mayor's office or something. And then Fox News goes around and says, they're stealing Christmas. No, they're not. They're just applying the Constitution. Go and change the bloody Constitution. Then you can do what you want. Then you can say this is a Christian country, and then you've got it made. But as it stands, it's exactly what Rob says. It's a secular approach. You're not allowed to do that. And the same is happening in Europe. And now they are all that they are doing is they are giving a legal, foundation to companies who have been doing that in any case, because you're not allowed to go into any company and display any kind of political or religious array or anything that propagates it. You're not allowed to do that anyway. But there were cases where female Muslims went and they took them to court and said, but I want to wear my hijab. No, you don't have a case. So what they've given is security to the companies who say we don't want any kind of display. That's it. And now, of course, Muslims are making this. An EU court has ruled that employers can sack women for wearing hijabs. And then saying, well, because you're not allowed to do that, this is now increasing Islamophobia. I don't know where they get this from. This is so silly. Okay, the second item. Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's clearly a case of I'm doing the victim mentality. We're the minority. You've got to treat us equally. Nobody's saying you're not being treated equally. But private employers have the rights to do that. And now if that has been enshrined in law and it appeals to everybody, then I think, that's entirely fair. It's not as if you're out in the public. So, when you sign a contract and you accept some sort of private employment, then you are under different rules than if you're out in the public street. You know, and as long as it's made clear to you and it's not sprung on you, or if it is and you have lawful reasons to do so, well then I don't think there's anything an employee can say about that.
And Don Knobhead is making the point, and I'm not going to enlarge this on the screen, because he's saying, well, this is my general symbol for religion, and you can put anything you want there. And if this is obscene or derogatory or pejorative or anything like that, it doesn't really matter. So you're not supposed to do that. So it works both sides. And I have a freedom not only of, but also from religion. So I can go and expect my employer to make sure that I'm not being accosted by this thing of a guy hanging on a cross with thorns, that the blood is streaming down, and him being tortured. And I need to look at this the whole bloody day. I can expect them to not do that. And I think this is only fair. That, of course, Muslims go and do this as victim playing, of course. Well, if you have a different opinion, let us know. If you think this is a good thing, then let us know. And if you think, no, we should be allowed to do this. The funny thing is, in the non-Muslim countries, there are more Muslims demanding prayer rooms and time off to go to pray than in Muslim countries. Because in the Muslim countries, I mean, we always had, that doesn't matter what floor, what company, they always had one floor available for prayer. And what happened? Nobody was using it because they were not interested. They were working, they were, you know, if they wanted time off to go for a chat or something, they went to the coffee machine, but not to the prayer room. So the prayer room was hardly ever used. The same with the elevator. I don't know if you've seen my video on an expatriate's example of something where I showed that there's an elevator which says ladies only. So there's an elevator reserved for women. And then women came and said, you know, we feel discriminated. Why should we have an elevator all to ourselves? We're working together with men all the time, every single day. And then when we leave or enter the building, we need to have an elevator all to ourselves. Do we require some sort of special protection? No, we don't. So it was the women protesting the fact that there was an elevator reserved for them. So it's quite funny. Okay, the second item is, now this is quite weird, and I need your help, guys. What is Eid el-Kabir? Because I found that this is a special holiday for Nigeria, and it is the identical holiday that I know as the sacrifice holiday, where Abraham is supposed to sacrifice his son, and he follows his God and is, you know, quite willing to do so, until God says, no, do the sheep or something instead. And up until this day, a lot of people say, well, you see, this is brilliant behavior. This is how you should be. This is how a Muslim should obey their God. And they should be willing to sacrifice their one and only son to this God. And just to make the point, you know, to bring it across and make it look like, yeah, this is brilliant. Every year they're sacrificing millions and millions of animals just for a sacrifice. And this slaughter is horrible. And I think the whole thing is immoral, where a God will go to a man and torture him to the extent, because Muslims are saying, well, he didn't let him go through with it. Yeah, but does that really make it so much different? I think this is emotional torture, what this God is doing, telling the guy, I'm going to make you kill your son. I want to test your obedience. Go and kill your son. But God, do I really have to kill my son? Yes, if you obey me, if you love me, if you believe that I'm a God, you will kill your son. Until he is ready to go through with it, the son is being tied down, and the son doesn't understand what's going on. And he's screaming, Dad, 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 what are you doing to me? And then he lifts his knife, and the son sees that he is going to be stabbed. And at that moment, God says, nah, never mind, just take a sheep. That's cruel. That's in my eyes, that's torture. And then Muslims go and celebrate this. That's crazy. So anyway, in Nigeria, they call this Eid al-Kabir. this year what has happened, and this is what caught my eye, they are deploying 3,000 police officers to Benin and to some other mosques, and the excuse is, well, they need to protect the Muslims. But the police chief gave a different sort of reason, because he says during this time, a lot of Muslims are taking advantage of others and stealing like left, right, and center. So the crime skyrockets during these 2 days. And so this is why they're now deploying police to stop and curb the level of crime over this holiday. So there you go. Any other comments on this?
No, I think you've said it all there.
All right, we've reached our favorite segment, which is and now Mustafa's not here, which is the Krazy Komments corner. And it's a pity that Mustafa is not here, so I will have to read this for him.
Just make it a bit bigger. That's a bit small.
Yeah, how do I go to the top? Can I can do it like this. Can I scroll down? No, I can't. Yes, no, I can't. Yeah, this is the program doesn't allow me to do that for some odd reason.
Just share the application window. That's probably easier.
This is on camera. This is on virtual camera.
Oh, that's why it won't work. Right.
Yeah. So I do not know what this is a reply to. Now, I've dropped the link for Mustafa, and for some reason he's not here today. So he must have posted something, and then this is the reply. Somebody says, so apparently a 9-year-old who didn't hit puberty and is playing with dolls is fuck material for you and your Muhammad. So I don't know who said this. And then somebody like Shan Malik, I don't know what this animal is supposed to be. Is that a dog or something? And he says, in simple word, anyone that can disrespect, okay, I don't understand the English. In simple word, anyone that can disrespect of blah, 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 they deserve death, even you also. Okay. I think this is a veiled death threat or something. That's the only thing that I can see here that would make sense. And then Mustafa writes back, insulting your imaginary superhero means someone deserves death. That's a psychotic way of thinking. You need help. This is true. And then this guy writes back, imaginary? Yes, indeed, imaginary. It's an imaginary God. It's not real. What do you think? It's crazy. Anyway, it doesn't exist. Okay, what do I have here?
That's way too big. Yeah.
Oh, no. This is what I want to do later, because I want to show what is happening with the Preserved Koran. Okay, I need to do the same thing here again. This is what you sent, right?
No, I haven't sent you any. Don't know what that is.
Then maybe this is also by Mustafa. Today is the final of Euro, so I thought I would give you an example regarding it. The example of Muslims is like a normal football. Oh, it's an analogy. Okay, here we go. The example of Muslims is like a normal football match where certain rules are decided, and the team that follows the rules and scores the goal wins. Hopefully, that will be England today. The example of atheists is like a bunch of people standing in a football stadium and debating where the football came from, who should be the referee, and what should the rules be. Okay, this underlines the statement that Rob and I have made, I don't know for how long now, that Muslims, for some reason, no, let's say Muslim apologists, are totally incapable of coming up with tangible analogies or analogous analogies, because what they come up with is always so silly. It simply really does not make any sense. And then somebody says, you really love your examples, don't you? Also, England lost. So nothing here makes sense. But this analogy is really sad, really. And they can't do any better than this. And then this is a guy, I don't know, he's on Facebook. Now, the funny thing is he's allowed to say whatever he wants to say, but as soon as I say something, I get blocked. So he says, Aki, like, bro, James, please, for the sake of Allah and for the sake of the souls you are misguiding, I beg you, please stop with your attempt at dawah. I know your intentions are good and may Allah bless you, but you are doing far more harm than good with your idiotic posts. Now, he's directing this at a fellow Muslim and who's really making silly claims. And this is now a fellow Muslim who is telling this guy, don't do what you're doing, because even I can see that this is not going to go down well. And then this guy says, I wonder if you will ever reveal your true identity. I don't know what that has to do with that. And let me go down here now. Oh, this is tedious. He says, James, I wonder if you will. I suspect you are an ex-Muslim posing with ridiculous arguments to make Islam look bad. Whether you believe it or not, you will face Allah on the Day of Judgment and suffer horrific fate. Okay, so I don't know if these are two Muslims discussing this or not. Because James now says, sure, that's why I have my real name and was using my real profile. I hope and pray either Allah guides you or exposes you. So even Muslims are not 100% sure of what happens when they are talking. Oh, okay, he skipped one of the files. All right. Now, these are some comments now, which were made on the video that we're going to be discussing today. Allah, O Akbar. Okay. O Akbar, I haven't seen that version before. No other ummah can match this ummah in this. No other nation has chain of narration but the nation of the final prophet Muhammad. And subhanallah, it also shows the virtues of the companions over all nations. Jazakallah for the video. I salute the team who made. No. Now, I don't know if you've seen the title. We're going to be talking about the Preserved Koran. And what they are saying, and this is showing the huge, big problem that these people have. So this Abu Hanzala is not alone. Okay, it was 2 years ago, but 227 people thought, yeah, this is actually a good comment. And this is the problem that a lot of Muslim apologists and Muslims in general have because they believe this. No other nation has a chain of narration when only the nation of the final prophet Muhammad. Because they are saying the Quran must be preserved because we are memorizing it, and therefore the memorization can't have mistakes because we have 2,000 people able to memorize it. They do not understand that there is no original Quran. So they do not understand that whatever these people are memorizing, you don't know whether this is the correct and original Quran or not. This is the problem. Because if somebody changes a couple of words, like I've shown that the Tashkent version says they are Muslims, and the 1924 version that we have today, the Hafs version based on Asim, says they were. So we have two. One says they were Muslims, the other one says they were not Muslims. So which one is the correct one? Now, if you go and you learn the version they were not Muslims, maybe God said they were, and then you're reciting the wrong version. So you're going to be in deep shit because you're pissing off your God. And then you're going to go to hell because you're memorizing the wrong Quran. So the danger is that you should actually go and say, I don't know which version is the better version or best version or correct version. I'm going to go with this one, which I believe is the correct version, and I hope that it is. But you cannot be sure. You cannot say no other nation has a chain of narration. Only we have. And because we have a chain of narration, this automatically makes it correct. That is a huge problem that a lot of Muslims have. And I've heard this so many times that people argue for this. Another one says, God plans, although understood by very few, are full of wisdom and deed. So in other words, there's a God who has all knowledge, who knows people are going to corrupt the Quran, are going to corrupt the Bible, are going to corrupt the Torah. and says, well, I allowed the corruption to take place in the Torah and the Bible, but now with the Quran, I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to like check it out, and I'm going to make sure that nobody changes it. Nobody can change the words of the Quran. And this is the wisdom. And then we find hundreds and thousands of mistakes, variants, differences. We have, I don't know how many official Qurans which are completely different in so many things. There's a team, and I'm getting this from Dr. J. Smith, who said that there's a team going through, I think, 30 different Qurans, and they have found close to 100,000 differences in these 30 Qurans. And then people still come and they say, well, it's perfectly preserved, and this is the plan of a God. Now, could a God have done better? Could a God have said, well, listen, I don't need a book. There are people, the messengers, who understand the message. They have the messages. I gave this message to the messengers, and they are now educating the people. This is like a teacher comes into class and says, okay, I'm going to teach you what 1 and 1 is, but I'm not going to teach all of you. I'm just going to teach 2 of you, and those 2 need to go to you guys and teach the rest. Now, you're dependent on what these messengers tell you. Whether they have understood how to work 1 + 1, you don't know. You're dependent on it. And now, instead of the teacher going to the people and say, well, I will teach you, I will give you the information, God goes and says, no, I will give it to the messengers. And then what? And then instead of giving it to the people, he gives it to the messengers, and then the messengers are the ones that you are believing that they are giving you the correct message. How is that full of wisdom? I don't get this. And then the other one says, I'm amazed. I had an argument about this in my school today. And guess what? I told my friend that the Quran had been the same since it came, and she disagreed. Such a coincidence.
Virtually everybody who's not a Muslim is going to agree, and maybe even some that do. So why is it? It's to be expected. Unless you live in a Muslim-only area, people are going to disagree with your fantastical claims.
Exactly, but guess what? I had this very discussion today, and here comes the video. Such a coincidence. And you've mentioned this, I don't know, like 2 million times already, where Michael Shermer says, "What you tend to forget the misses, but you remember the hits." And this is exactly what happens here. Such a coincidence.
Yes, it's a selection bias.
And then finally, the feeling that one gets when hearing and reciting the Quran is the only proof we need. This is also something that you pointed out.
That's entirely irrational.
Yeah.
Because proof suggests that you have some logical way to ascertain truth from falsity. And hearing something that you can't rationally describe other than to give your own aesthetic subjective opinion is certainly not a way for it to be rationally justified. You can say, oh, that sounds nice. Well, that doesn't mean it's true, but other things can sound nice as well and be untrue. So that's not necessarily a poetry, for example, or music or whatever. It's not necessarily true, but exactly. It might have some emotional or psychological response. So, I mean, that's just but somebody like that, right? If somebody said that to me, I say, thanks very much. Thanks for your time. We're going to move on now. You just disqualified yourself from having a rational conversation. Thanks. Anyway.
Because it's quite silly, because just because something appeals to your emotion doesn't make it true, doesn't make it correct, doesn't make it in any way convincing. It's just an appeal to emotion. It's, if you find something nice, okay, well, I mean, I can enjoy a science fiction movie, novel, story, or whatever, but it doesn't mean that it's true. So it's just the feeling that I like something doesn't do anything to its veracity. So I don't know. It's quite strange. Okay. What is next on the agenda?
It's puzzling. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
Actually, there's another one that I want to give to you because.
Well, he said you'll be the greatest president in history of, but you know what? I'll take that also, but that you could be. But he said we'll be the greatest president, but I would also accept the other. In other words, if you do your job, but I accept that, then I watched him interviewed and it was like he never even was here. It's incredible. I watched him interviewed a week later and it's like he was never in my office. And you can even say that.
I don't quite know what that gibberish was.
That was an original speech by President Trump, ex-President Trump. And this reminds me so much of the Quran, like complete utter nonsense, just stringing some words together and creating word salad, thinking that you are making a profound statement. And this is a president, okay? And this is why I find this remarkable. This is why I chose this quote now, because it shows us so much that this is so similar to what we see in the Quran, where everybody's saying, wow, the Quran written by God, and blah, 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 it's so profound, so substantial, and so everything. And then when you actually go and read it, you find, no, not really. And this discrepancy between the one and the other is exactly what I found so fascinating with this. This is why I said, okay, let me play this, because this is such an amazing thing. All right, let me share my screen and show you what we're talking about. The Reader's Digest. There we go. I can make this a little bit bigger.
You missed the intro, but it's all right. Let's move on anyway. It's all good.
Which intro did I miss?
It's puzzling.
I did. I gave you two. I gave you the puzzling, and I gave you this one. Okay, so
I missed that.
we are in the Quran. We are on channel. I'm looking at the word channel, and I'm reading channel. We're in chapter 11, which is called Hud, which doesn't have any meaning, which is supposed to be a name, which nobody really knows. And this is also one of these examples where, why should a chapter be called Hud when nobody knows what this is? And what we were doing last week is we were going through Noah and the flood, and we went through the question that Pine Creek asked, and then where this thing landed. And this is what I called another indication that the Quran, the origins of the Quran, the history of Islam, actually come from a lot further north than Mecca or Medina, in fact, 1,000 kilometers north, because this hill or mountain or whatever, Hira or something, is in that area. And so there are many indications that point us in the direction of the northern Arabian Peninsula. Okay, so chapter 11, sentence number 56, the sentence, the sentences that you see are normally quite long, and they contain a lot of duplicates, a lot of repetitions. I leave all that out, and I just give you the essence, what I understand is in that sentence. That's why these are very, very short, and don't in any way, correspond with what you see in the Quran, unless you go and you percolate everything, and you just sort of take what the meaning is of this entire sentence. Now, what it says in sentence 56, it says, God controls every creature. And the way that it is expressed is it holds the forelock. Now, what is the forelock? I have no clue what the forelock is. But apparently, it is in an animal, in a cow, in cattle, I don't know if in camels as well. You have between the eyes and between the horns or something, you have a piece of a patch of longer hair. I know this with horses anyway, that you can take and you can direct them by just gently tugging on them, and they will go where you're pulling this. So I think this is what they mean with forelock. I suppose if horses have it, that would indicate that camels also have this. I don't know. I've never checked, actually. And so they're using the word forelock here in the Quran. And now what Bouquet did is he said, well, if it's the forelock, that means it's in the front of the head. And because underneath that you have the frontal cortex, and if you take then the frontal cortex as the area of the brain which takes the rational decisions, as opposed to the back of the brain where you have the, the limbic system with the hypothalamus, the hippocampus and all that. So they said the opposite is the front of the brain, which is the rational part, and therefore what the Quran is doing is it is already giving you an indication of the psychology that only discovered 1400 years later, that the rational part of the brain is in the front.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one wild speculation. I mean, Al-Jalalain here basically says that it's used because he who is taken by his forelock suffers the ultimate humiliation. Surely my Lord is on a straight path, that is the way of justice. So that's Al-Jalalain suggesting that the forelock is used as a humiliation. So everybody's got their own speculations here.
Exactly.
We'll try and work out what this means, because it's not straightforward, so we'll speculate about this.
But it's quite funny how you go from forelock to this, to this, to this, and you end up with this is psychology, and the Quran predicts the brain. I don't know, just one part of it. And then, you know, if you switch on your critical thinking, then immediately you will ask yourself, well, if it mentions the forelock and says this is the rational bit, why doesn't it name the rest of the brain regions? Why doesn't it tell you what the rest of the brain is doing? Why doesn't it mention the brain? It doesn't mention the brain in any way. It always tells you that you're thinking with the heart. So everything is wrong. And then suddenly from out of the blue, it tells you, well, this tells you the region of the brain. Oh my God, this is so pathetic. And
the way they can jump to conclusions, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Just, this is what happens with the human mind. We've got to try and work out something that is inexplicable. We've got to try and make sense of it. So we'll come up with something that'll just, you know, we'll try and speculate it might mean this. And once we've got a speculation, well, hey, then we're off to the horses. Then we can run the race. Well, sure, but you've got to make sure that you're actually running on the right racetrack to start with. You don't just plonk down on any piece of land and start running. But that's what these people want to do, right?
Okay,
because there's such a big thing against it, isn't it? Right? If it were a book as it appears to be, that is, you know, in certain parts inexplicable, and the message being sent down, it's clear, concise, complete, and error-free, then obviously that's a contradiction. But rather than accept it as a contradiction and use their critical thinking, Muslims will have to come up with something to try and make sense of this for themselves, right? This won't make sense or be in any way substantive to anybody whose brain is switched on. But if her brain is switched off, or you appeal to other considerations other than trying to understand the Quran, well, then you can be convinced. But like you and I say, stop. Anybody has to read this book just to go, hang on a moment, this is utter tosh and it's vague. There's no particular meaning here. And then, of course, you get the excuse, oh, well, there's some verses that are clear and some that are opaque. Well, is that the message that's supposed to be sending? And how does that conflict with Surah 3, 138 or Surah 12, 111? It's just a big mess that, you know, that's exactly what we'd expect from multiple people, you know, writing hundreds of years afterwards, trying to make up a story.
And we saw earlier on that the first sentence of this very chapter, where he says there are perfect sentences in the Quran. Well, how can it be perfect? If it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't give you any information, it's sort of a la-di-da. How is that being perfect? It's not. It's exactly the opposite. So
what does perfect even mean, right? It's just a vacuous term unless you can define it and then have some way to show what not perfect looks like. I'm getting more and more of this sort of stuff where people make these grandiose claims, and I ask them, what would a state of affairs or what would a sentence need to look like in the Quran such that you accept that it was imperfect, or such that the state of affairs shows not God, or whatever it is? Do you know how often I get a response? I haven't had one yet. Not one yet.
Not a surprise.
Because the way I don't phrase it particularly to make it difficult to understand. All I'm asking is, well, show me not God world. What would they need to look like? If everything out there is God, if this book is God, what would you need to see in the book to go, I can ascertain that's not God? All I'm going to say to you, well, hang on a moment, that could be God as well. How do you know it's not? And you could give me some excuse and I can just say, well, hang on a moment. How do you know that the mind of God isn't such that he's got a greater reason? And at that point, you've got nothing to say. I mean, you can ramble and you can babble a bit for your own entertainment, but it's not going to be impressive. And that's the problem. You can't actually ascertain whether this is from God. If everything's from God, then how would you know anything never being from God? And that's a big problem.
Absolutely. Anyway, then 57 is a perfect example of this. I have conveyed the message. If you turn away, it's on you alone. How exactly? This is exactly what we've just found. This is the opposite. No, you have not conveyed the message. You're giving us gibberish. You're giving us, I mean, how many idioms are in the Quran that don't make any more sense today? Like the people the right hand possesses. That does not make sense anymore today. We have to speculate, and we have to go and find out, well, what could be meant by that? And then we have to find the context, and then we find, they're talking about slaves. Okay. And there are so many of these idioms that are being used that are specific to the area and the era. It doesn't make sense today. Yet, here we go. I have conveyed the message. What message? The only message that you have conveyed is maybe, well, there's a God, and you have to obey, you have to be afraid, and that's it. That is the message. Hey. And instead of bringing a real tangible argument, it says if you turn away, it's on you alone. Well, no, China, that's not how it works. Okay, 58. When we commanded, now this is now God speaking, I suppose. When we commanded, we saved Hud, whoever that may be, and the believers around him from severe punishment. Now, what is this God's job title? What does it say in sentence number 1? The all merciful, the most merciful, the ever highest, whatever. It's all about mercy. And now he's saying we saved around him from severe punishment. This is your bloody job, to save people from severe punishment, because you are all merciful. So what are you talking about? How can you say, I'm a bus driver, and look, I took people from A to B in a bus. That's your fucking job. I don't understand these sentences, really. I don't know what is the meaning of that. I don't know. And then in 59, it says, Ad rejected and disobeyed. Rejected what? And disobeyed in what way? What did they do? What was the proposition that was given to Ad? Ad seems to be some sort of a region or city or village or hamlet or I don't know what. So they seem to be in a status where they were given something or a suggestion or whatever, and they said, no, not interested. And then they disobeyed because somebody commanded them something. Okay, what was being commanded and how did they disobey in what way? We don't get anything. This is the perfect Quran with the perfect sentences. That's why I put 3 question marks there, by the way. Rob, you're funny because I guarantee you won't ever say what you would. What? I guarantee you won't ever say what you would accept is from God. No, how can anyone do that?
Funny he should mention that. I'm looking at a post I put onto somebody's video about absence of evidence, etc. And I said the following. We would expect to see, among other things, a universe designed for humans instead of one designed to kill us almost instantly everywhere, apart from about 30% of the surface of one planet in one galaxy out of 2 trillion galaxies with 400 billion stars. Number 2, here's just 4 things I just quickly wrote down in this comment, right? A world without unnecessary suffering. Number 3, an unconditionally loving God if it's omnibenevolent. Number 4, clear communication to all rational human beings such that they all came to the same virtually inescapable conclusion. So there's just 4 things. Easy, and I wrote that down. I think it was, when was this? Yes, literally 1 day ago. So there are just 4 things. I could probably come up with a myriad of other things, but there are just 4 things that I would expect to see if a particular omnibenevolent God existed that wanted to communicate with humans and indeed wanted some sort of relationship in any way that we could understand.
And I keep on saying, I would actually love to have a God, this supernatural law keeper, the ultimate justice keeper, the ultimate justice league. I'd love to have that. So if there's a God out there, it knows what I want, it can do what I want, so why doesn't it? Why would a God hide from me and expect me to just take everything on faith, which is the worst possible way of accepting anything, and then say, well, if not, then, the argument is always Pascal's wager. it's actually the other way around. If there were a God, it is testing people to see if they are able to use the brain that they were supplied with. So in actual fact, what this God, if it exists, is testing is for the ability to distinguish between truth and fake and lie and dishonesty and hypocrisy, and then say, well, only those people who reject the existence of this God that I am proposing, which doesn't make sense, those are the people I'm going to select. I don't need anybody else. That is what the real story is.
I mean, that's fairly hilarious. Cherry pick one word out of it. I said unconditionally loving, which means that he would be loving under all conditions. That's what unconditional means. And yes, that would be a condition for a God that would be worthy of a relationship, because of course no God is worthy of worship. A God that is powerful will already know that it is superior and therefore wouldn't require worship essentially from the equivalent of ants to us. Imagine we wanted worship from ants. How is that going to be beneficial in any way to us? And so what I'm looking for is an unconditionally loving God, meaning that under every condition, which would be similar to all merciful or most merciful, it's just that unconditionally loving is the highest level. And if your God is a maximally powerful God, then one of those attributes presumably would be love, and the highest level of love would be unconditional love. Since I don't know what all loving actually means, it's a vacuous term, but I think anybody can understand what unconditionally loving means, and that would certainly be a requirement for a God for me to have a relationship with, as I say, not for me to worship, because I think worship is immoral anyway, so no God would insist on or even ask for worship, but rather a relationship. That's what unconditionally loving people do. But then again, of course, the books can't say that, because then it would be a relationship instead of a slave-master sort of interaction.
And God alone knows we disagree on a lot of things. But here, I agree 100%. I totally agree with those four things, and I can think of other ones as well. Yeah, sure. So in this case, no, totally. So what is his reply? So you, the human, determines God's conditions. Absolutely. What else do you think this is?
In order to accept somebody, yeah, they need to meet our conditions, because that's what acceptance means, doesn't it? In any relationship, I invite you to think, I appreciate that might not be something you do a lot, but I invite you to think about it and go, in order for me to be in a relationship with any being, sentient being, they need to meet certain requirements, or at least not violate other ones, which would in and of itself mean that they meet certain requirements. When I used to do relationship coaching and training, what people found very difficult is giving the positive attributes. And all I used to say to them is, well, tell me all the things you don't want, and then just write the opposite. That's the easiest way to find out what you want, because most people know what they don't want. They're not clear on what they want.
You shouldn't be held accountable since unconditional, right? You don't get it. You really do not understand it. If a God were to tell me, okay, Maverick, I mean, Omar, whatever, if a God tells you you're allowed to beat your wife, do you beat your wife? No, you don't, because you're better than your God. If your God says you can have 15 concubines, slaves, or whatever, do you do that? No, you don't, because you're better than your God. So you, even though you reject it, even though you deny this, and here is the correct usage of the word deny, you are denying it, you are actually taking control. You are the one. You are your own moral standard, because you are not doing what the Quran says. And this is where you decide for yourself what your conditions are. And that's it.
But also, just going back on that for a moment, remember that who's keeping who accountable? If you're supposed to be, quote unquote, accountable to this being in the afterlife, well, by then this life is finished. And again, an unconditionally loving God would help you recognize that perhaps next time, if there was a next time, if you had multiple lives or whatever it is, that may not be the best course of action. But in order to say that, the God would then need to have a hypothetical imperative. In other words, there's a certain goal by which you can say something is good or bad. If it's the goal to wipe human beings out or to torture people, then of course doing those actions is in line with the goal and therefore good. However, if you take good to be well-being, which I take, so people who go, well, it's good, and what they're actually using as well-being, well, they're just borrowing from mine and other atheist standards, which is fine. You can do that because you don't seem to have that standard, or at least you do, but you try to hide it away. Well, it depends on whether it's, and once you're dead, what can he do to you then? And why would he want to if he's an unconditionally loving God? Again, unconditionally loving, especially if you yourself can't be hurt, is to educate, to improve, to assist those that are lesser than you. Especially if by that stage, how's punishment going to help them? It's not going to, especially if they don't come back for another life, as you believe, then how is punishment actually going to help them in the afterlife? Are they suddenly going to go, well, now I'm okay, can I be let into heaven? Well, how, if a God was unconditionally loving, he would show them how it's better rather than punish them. Because if we are in fact just children and some people can't do any better, well, then they're just willed to be that way. Would you punish somebody that had, some sort of mental disorder? No, what we do is take care of them because we recognize they don't know the consequences of their actions, or if they do, it's at a childlike level. And so we put them away precisely because they could hurt other people. If they could not hurt other people like we couldn't hurt God, then what would be the point? They could go on doing whatever that is. That would be like a baby trying to hurt Colossus, the fictional character that's made of steel that can't be hurt, for example. There would be no effect. And eventually the baby would work out, or the child or the human in the analogy would work out, this isn't effective. I'm getting nowhere fast here. But then the other point that was made there was the second one down there. Since God doesn't need you, who cares about your terms? Well, it seems like God does seem to need or really want us, because he keeps telling us about his incessant requirements or guidance all the time. It's like the stalker who just won't give it up. And then says, well, hey, I don't need everybody. That's like a passive aggressive thing. What they do really want it, but telling you they don't want it all the time. They can't stop thinking about it. Funny, the rest of us don't think about God or care about it. It's just this God that keeps on telling everybody that we need to do X, Y, and Z. So it certainly looks like he's very needy. This is not the behavior or actions of an entity supremely powerful that doesn't actually require us in any way.
And I'm going to chip in here as well, because you've been listening to the Gin and Tonic show for many years, so you should know that this is a silly argument. You are really, really displaying your own ignorance here, because we've gone through this. We've shown so many times that this God doesn't need anything, and yet it creates a pen. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't need a pen. It creates a pen. It doesn't need the Quran. Creates the Quran. It doesn't need a universe. Creates a universe. It doesn't need galaxies. It creates galaxies. It doesn't need planets, stars, moons. It creates planets, stars, moons. It doesn't need human beings. It creates human beings. It doesn't need angels. It creates angels. It doesn't require worship, yet builds people with only one purpose, and the jinn. So 2 species already, creates them for something it doesn't need, which is worship. And then you come here and you tell us, nah, this God doesn't need anything. We need the God. No. What is a God without subjects? It's just a lonely dude.
Well, you're not paying attention. Why do you need punishment? What you need is education. I didn't say the result would be the same. If you were listening, I said that somebody who had done bad things could be educated, could be taken under the wing of an unconditionally loving God and said, hey, in virtue of some goal, let's say well-being or whatever the case is, can you notice what happens here? Let me swap it around. Let's see what it feels like if you look through the eyes of the people that you've done X to. Now, how do you feel about it? That's educational. Some people might say punishment, but at least that way, especially if you're in heaven and you can't actually physically be harmed in any long way, that would be an education to look through the eyes of somebody else and to see and feel what it's like. Imagine the people that did that, looking through the eyes of a woman who's tied up in the ground being stoned to death, and then wondering whether they felt any remorse thereafter. So I'm not saying the result is the same. What I'm saying is that there's education, and some people might split the difference, but whatever God's intentions are, an unconditionally loving God doesn't need to punish because A, he's not hurt, B, it's supposed to be free will. And if it's free, then it needs to be coercive free. Otherwise, it's not free will, it's coercion.
And there is a benefit to the show today, even if it's just this, because you are really rolling out the reason why we do the Gin and Tonic show, why we've done it for 10 years, to educate people, to show people how not to think, how not to approach this. And you are giving us the perfect example of somebody who is trying to justify the existence of their God at all cost, even if it means looking totally silly, looking totally stupid, looking ignorant, looking like a fool, and not having any arguments, not being able to substantiate anything, but you are still trying to protect your God. And this is already the value that we are showing here in a living object, on a living object, a case study you are bringing to us. No,
all the stuff you mentioned is pure mercy to the creation. Well, if there is mercy, then it doesn't require justice. And that's what we've said all along. Either take justice or mercy. I'll take mercy every day of the week. And most humans would too, if not all of them.
And creating slaves and then saying it's a mercy for the slaves to create them as slaves so that they can be beaten and punished and have no rights, have no holiday. They can't establish a living, an existence of their own, nothing at all. And then you say this is a mercy? No, it is not. Creating women who have to go and cower for all their life. They have to obey their husbands. They have to go and hide away. They need to cover themselves because this God is incapable of teaching men how not to rape. So he teaches the women and tells the women that they have to cover because he's incapable of somehow restraining the men. Come on, this is pathetic.
I thought life was a test, not an education. Isn't it the greater the test, the greater the reward?
Okay, let's ignore this. This is getting silly now. Okay, we're on the Quran, chapter 11, and we showed that Ad is rejected and disobeyed. We don't know how, what, where, when. And then we have the same topic again that we had last week where I said, this is crazy. They were followed by a curse. Now, how many curses do something to you? What does it take? And I still don't understand this thing with a curse. And then it says, be gone, Ad, the people of Hud. So Hud is a guy who seems to own the people of Ad, and then he says, this God, okay, they need to be gone. What does that mean? So he curses them. Does he then kill everybody in Ad? I don't know. The merciful God, the all-merciful, the most merciful, and just kills everybody, apparently. And
just
then,
a reminder, it's 9 o'clock, but we can continue if you like.
Should we stop at 60?
Yeah, okay.
All right, then let me just mark this so that I know where we stopped. Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, no, this is what I need. Sorry. Oh, goodness. All right, let me just mark this. Then this is what we stopped, and then we can continue next week. All right. Okay, so the next part, do you have the video ready? Are you going to run it or do I run it?
You can run it this time. I think you've selected it, so if you run it, then I can count stop. I might not stop as often as I would with debate-type videos.
Okay, I need to see where...
And if we finish early, it's all good. It's not a problem. We don't have to finish exactly at 10 every day, every time.
All right, so share video file... No, not
Don't
video
you love
file.
it stops? This is the sort of thinking that goes on, right? There is nothing more probable than a God, so atheists are already fighting uphill. And I responded, good luck demonstrating that. The response, Rob, all it takes is for you to bring something more probable. You see, this is the mindset, right? I'll shift the goalposts, shift the burden of proof. I say there's nothing more probable. I say, good luck demonstrating that. Oh, well, you showed me that there's something more probable. As if people are going to fall for that. The viewers here are too smart for that as well.
Wow. All right. We're going to watch a video which is called How to Prove the Quran Has Been Preserved Accurately. Now, before we start, this is what I prepared. I just want to make people aware of something, which I think, I'm not sure if people know this, which I put here. So, cluck, cluck, there we go. Now, this is what it says in the Quran. I made a video about this, so I just took the research that I did on the sentences in the Quran. There's 4 of them, which handle the kind of topic. You can't change God's words. Now, the Quran is considered to be God's words, okay? So you can't change anything in the Quran. Well, you can, but you can't. I don't know. I mean, it's happened lots of times, but you can't. We have, without doubt, sent down the message, and we will assuredly guard it from corruption. Now, this is the central sentence, which in my eyes is pretty meaningless. But a lot of intention is placed into this, and a lot of interpretation goes on to make this a profound statement that it is guarded. The Quran is guarded. In other words, it has today the same format, the same contents, the same meaning, the same everything as it did when it was revealed piecemeal over 23 years, over 1,000 years ago. I don't understand the sentence. I don't really know what it's supposed to be, but for Muslims, this seems to be some profound statement. Another one is, this is an honorable Quran in a protected book. Protected. What does protected book mean? None can grasp it except the sincere. It's another silly sentence. And a revelation from the Lord of the universe. But why does it need to be protected? I mean, if a book makes sense, I've never heard a book about the theory of relativity, or it has never been changed by anybody, because it's meaningful in itself. It contains valuable information, so nobody needs to change it. So there we have it. So I don't quite understand why it needs to be protected.
I think it's entirely reasonable to suggest that none can grasp it except the sincere means the Quran, the book, the entire book, because all you'd have to have in there is none can grasp certain verses of it. But if none can grasp any of it, or it, because I think it and any of it are synonymous there, why would you think that it's, because again, it would be very easy to qualify it and say none can grasp some of it. Then we go, okay, there's some of it you can, some of it you can't. But if none can grasp it, that seems to me, again, somebody would have to bring an argument to say, no, it means some of it, because if you can't grasp it, meaning the Quran, as in the entire book, which seems to be the straightforward understanding there, then that would be highly problematic. And who decides who's sincere, by the way? Is there some methodology sent down by God for the sincere? And who are these people on earth that are in fact sincere? Since people claim to be sincere, and you have sheikhs, mullahs, and all the rest around the world, and they can't even agree with each other. So who is the sincere people, and how do we establish that?
And if none can grasp it, to take this one step further, we know of the 29 single-letter sentences which nobody can grasp. So they already, you have the whole thing like ad absurdum, which means nobody can do it. Nobody can grasp it, even if they're sincere, because it's not an honorable Quran, it's not a protected book, it's not a revelation, because nobody can grasp it. But
even
God.
In the Quran, right, it does say, one of the verses, remind me which one, you may not know it off the top of your head, Stops, but that there's certain verses only God knows. It actually says that, so we don't even have to infer that. Only God knows some of the verses. Where's that effect? I can try and look it up while we go through this, but I'm sure people are familiar with that. So the book itself is saying that. So what would be the purpose of sending a message that only you can understand some of? Is that to prove it's you? Well, if it is, how would one know, since nobody else can understand it except the original author, supposedly? That seems to me to be entirely in conflict with the goal, which is supposed to be a clear, complete, error-free guide. Why would you have verses that nobody else can interpret or understand?
And then finally, you have, indeed, it's a glorious Quran and a preserved master tablet. Now, we don't have this preserved master tablet. We don't have a master tablet. We don't have a tablet. We have a book. So where is this book? We don't have it. We don't know what the condition is of the Quran that we have today. We don't know what the contents is compared to this master tablet. So this is just another way of saying, well, you will never be able to find out, so you might as well stop. You might as well accept what we have today and stop thinking about it. But anyway, so this is what I thought. I will just give to people, just as a indication of what it is that we're talking about. So if you hear about the Quran being preserved, it's about these 4 sentences, and of course, a couple of sidebars, as Rob has pointed out. But in effect, this is what we're talking about. Okay. So then let's go and play this, and if there are any questions, just type 1 enter, 1 enter, 1 enter. Then we will look at this, and then I will stop quickly, the same as Rob won't have to say stop.
Be sure that the Quran we have today is the same Quran that the Prophet Muhammad taught to his companions over 1400 years ago.
Can you hear this?
Yeah, can hear it.
Okay.
This question is central to the legitimacy of the religion of Islam, and to answer it, we need to know how the Quran was given to the Prophet, preserved by his companions, and then distributed around the Muslim world. This is the story of language, history, and the commitment of an entire civilization to preserving the words of God.
What is ironic is I recognize this because this is the Birmingham fragment. And in this Birmingham fragment, there are several discrepancies between what we have in the Quran today and what is on these 4 pages. Now, by taking this example, it shows that they don't even know what they are doing. They're showing here a version of the Quran that is much, much, much younger than the Quran that was allegedly revealed to the people sometime in the year between 611 and 632. And I don't understand why people don't pay attention to what they are doing, what the consequences are of what they are doing. I don't understand that. This is so short-sighted for me.
Yeah, not only that, though, why would you need to go
understanding.
through? Why would you need to go through all of this effort when all you had to do was God could have put forward an unbreakable obelisk in the middle of Mecca that had all of his writings in perfect, Arabic perhaps, and if you touched it, it changed to your own language, perfectly preserved and perfectly transmitted that everybody in their own language could understand exactly the same thing. Then there wouldn't be any effort, there wouldn't be any mistakes, and we could all go to the source and see what's there to be said. And then, of course, it'd be so good that you could match it with everything that you understood about reality. And if there was any discrepancy, you could go there and it would explain to you where you're going wrong or why you're at error or whatever the case is. That would, of course, be something that's quite impressive. Instead, humans have to try and cobble this together over however many years. And of course, they're all fallible. They can all make mistakes. They're trying to do the best they can, supposedly, which I don't think these original people probably even were aware of doing, or that their descendants would think that they were doing a good job. But it's so trivially easy that it wouldn't put this quote-unquote test onto man, which inevitably, the man can't pass with perfect clarity anyway.
Yeah. The funny thing is, Maverick again is saying, I'm a liar. Well, if a liar, then show me where the lie is.
He thought you were me at that stage.
Yeah, okay, but who is the liar? Why is
No,
it? What did I say that is a lie? Do you have any indication as to what it is that I lied about? There is nothing that you have, and just making unwarranted claims is a bit silly.
According to the Muslim understanding, the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad over 23 years, from the age of 40 to his death at the age of 63. Over those 23 years, he received the revelation from God in a number of ways. Most commonly, it was spoken to him directly by the angel Gabriel.
Excuse me? God spoke to Muhammad directly? Conveyed by the angel Gabriel?
How do we know that's the case? It's pure speculation.
No, Rob, the point that I'm making, if it's conveyed by angel Gabriel, it's not God speaking, it's the angel speaking. God doesn't speak to Muhammad. I understand your point, but my point is that God is not talking to Muhammad. God is talking to Gabriel. Gabriel talks to Muhammad. Muhammad talks to his people who were not there, who did not see the angel, who were not privy to what the conversation was about. Everything runs through the single source of Muhammad. You need to trust Muhammad now that he is telling the truth and not making stuff up. And maybe he is just wrong, mistaken, hallucinating, or whatever. There are so many different possibilities because you only have a single source. And saying that God spoke to him is factually incorrect. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
I guess we could be super charitable. You know, we don't have to be, but we could be super charitable if this, you know, mysterious angel existed. Could it be a perfect transmission? Again, seems to me that Occam's razor would be useful here. But if we put aside Occam's razor for some inexplicable reason, and we accepted that the angel could be a perfect transmission device, if you like, or methodology, quite why you'd have to have the angel in between seems irrelevant and superfluous. But if it were the case, then you could say that the word of God is being transmitted. It's just not God saying it, but it's as if he was standing there. But again, you're sending it to somebody who's imperfect, right? So that, again, is you just like you've got pure water and it's going through a muddy sieve. It's always going to have some level of mud on the other side because that's the way that humans have been built. So one has to necessarily be skeptical unless you could demonstrate that, in fact, this entity, let's, in this case, Muhammad, not the angel, if we grant that the angel had infallibility and inerrancy, that is, that they couldn't be mistaken or in error, then that's fine. But we can't say the same about Muhammad because he's necessarily a fallible human being. And if the claim is that he's not, well, how do you demonstrate that claim? And so it just becomes, you know, even worse if you try to make stronger claims to defend the weaker ones. It just ends up being even worse for you than if you just sort of accept that it's fallible and, hey, it's probably true, but we can't be sure, etc.
Okay, Birmingham manuscript is different to what Quran you said. What? Birmingham manuscript is different to what Quran? Yes. This is the fact. You sad liar. Huh? I'm telling the truth. This is exactly what the case is. The Birmingham manuscript has 4 mistakes in it that is different from what we find in today's version of the Hafs Quran. So I don't know, just because you don't know about these differences, why are you calling me a liar? Because I know about the differences. I can easily show them. Or if you want to use Mr. Google, go ahead and do it. And in fact, Dr. Daniel Brubaker has made this public. It's even in his book. He shows the photos. It's everything is there. Yeah, he calls me a pathetic liar just because he is ignorant. He doesn't know what the situation is. I wonder if I were to now show you the photos. If I were to show you the photos of the differences, of these 4 differences between the Quran we have today and the Birmingham manuscript, these fragments, would you now apologize to me? No way. You're not going to do that. Because it doesn't matter whether something is true or not. To you, it doesn't matter. For you, the main thing is that you can go and insult somebody who doesn't believe what you believe. That's it.
Well, there's, like you say, there's other psychological, emotional, material considerations. So I don't think it makes a difference. If you could show Maverick that the Birmingham Quran was different from the Hafs Quran with these errors, as you suggest, he must continue believing what he's believed. Reject them in some way, as he's rejected the other errors that we've put forward, right? You have to find a way. So when you're so committed to it, you will find a way. It won't be persuasive to everybody else, but it'll be persuasive to you. And that's what people do. I see it in Christianity as well. But certainly it's the case in Islam as well. So they have to. There's a psychological, there's an emotional, even if they want to call it, some sort of intellectual commitment to adhere to the book and that it cannot be wrong. So everything else must necessarily be false, and we just need to find a way to falsify, which is, of course, the opposite of intellectual honesty, etc. Imagine if everybody had done that, right? We'd still be back in the Dark Ages thinking that electricity was God's anger or something, right? It's precisely because we don't do that anymore that we've moved forward as a species. But when you have this high level of commitment to something being the case, and you must find it, any critique to be erroneous, well, then the mind will play tricks on you and you will come up with incredibly weak arguments, thinking to yourself that it's incredibly strong. And everybody else can see that it's not, right? But you dig your heels in. It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon. And like I say, it doesn't just happen with some Muslims.
Yeah.
Other times, it came during his dreams, and on a number of occasions, it even came to him directly from God, and he experienced this as the sound of a heavy bell, after which the words of the revelation were made clear to him. Throughout those 23 years, the Prophet endeavored to share the revelation with those around him as soon as it came. He did this verbally, as he couldn't read or write, but he strongly encouraged others around him to write down the revelation, as well as memorize it.
So
Oh,
stop
boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is factually incorrect. We have sayings which say, don't write down what I say.
But also, what would be more persuasive, right? If you came in a booming voice and said, I speak now to Muhammad, but I speak loudly so that those around may hear and may bear witness and may write exactly my words, for the fact that, my servant, as accurate as he is, may forget, lest he forget a word here and there. But those around, those loyal followers of his, take now your pens and write down my words as I speak to Muhammad, as you listen in as the audience. That would have at least been a bit better than what we got, which is speaking to him in his head that nobody else could hear, and then him relaying it back. That would be much more impressive. In fact, people around there would have gone, holy crap, either somebody's got a massive loudspeaker or maybe there is something going on here.
Yeah. And this is, to me, the obvious error is that one, Muslims claim the Quran is the perfect guidance. And number two, Muslims admit the Quran isn't entirely clear. Some passages can't be understood, equals not perfect then. So this is what happens as soon as you switch on logical thinking, it immediately destroys the God. Or the text or whatever it is. As soon as you start to think logically and rationally, it's out, it's gone. There's no way that you can still do this.
Yeah, you just
thank
got
you
to ask
very
a
much for
Muslim.
that.
Yeah, you've just got to ask a Muslim, what does it mean for the Quran to be perfect? Get them to be very clear on what they mean. And then you just bring something like that. Now, the challenge you'll have, if you do it that way around, they'll see it coming. And now they'll try and obfuscate, I can never say that word properly, on what it means to be perfect. But if you obfuscate, thank you, stops. But if you say, hey, can you tell me what it means for the Quran to be perfect? Give me some substance. What would that mean substantially? Compare it to other books. What does it mean for it to be perfect, right? They might say rhyme, rhythm, etc. And you go, well, hang on, what about the message? Because it could sound nice. It could be in a particular number of words, whatever the case is. But isn't really the message the most important? Because if it said, gobbledygook or gibberish, but it said it in 10 words or it sounded good to the ear, would that be in any way impressive to those who care about what is supposed to be a message? The message obviously needs to be transmitted or communicated in a way that people understand. So ask what it means to be perfect first, and then you can, critique afterwards, because they need to do it without kind of a bias. Now, they might have a bias already, but at least if you do it off clean, then, you're going to get perhaps the cleanest, most potentially honest answer you can get. And then you bring the critique. If you do it the other way around, then they're wise to it. And now they're going to jump around on what they mean by perfect, right? Whereas they wouldn't otherwise do it.
This was the basis of how Muslims believed the Quran became preserved, not purely through written or oral means, but with both strengthening the other. The companions around him constantly strove to memorize these verses, with many eventually memorizing the entire book. And they simultaneously wrote them down on whatever materials they had around them, from parchment to bone to wood and stone. Over time, at least 65
So stop it there quickly. Did he say the companions around him?
I
thought he said that, because obviously they wouldn't have memorized the whole Quran because it wasn't done until after he died. So, I suppose he could just say, well, what I meant was the companions around him after he's died, because they wouldn't have memorized the entire Quran before he died because it wasn't fully revealed yet. So maybe that's just a small point that he would have to, change what he's saying there. But they memorized what they received from him, which again would have been a lot better if they heard it directly from God and God was simply speaking to Muhammad and they were, ear witnesses, like an audience listening in. That would have been more impressive than the way it was done, which is him telling them what supposedly he heard in his head. And presumably, stops, and you'll know it better than me, there probably were people around at the time when he received these revelations, but nobody else ever heard anything. So it was all in his head, which he then supposedly, dictated off to people.
Yeah, that's
To
the
me,
single
again, I
source.
would expect to hear a booming voice if it was God speaking, unless he's speaking in my mind. But then I'm going to go, why only speaking in his mind? Wouldn't it be more impressive? Wouldn't people think that that's more of a miracle if the booming voice came down and people for 100 miles around could hear it? And he said, I'm speaking to Muhammad here in this place at this time. Come ye out to him and see my messenger, or something like that. That would have been impressive. Now you get these accounts from people that no clue who this guy was. They heard this huge booming voice all together on one night, and they were all told to go in one place. I began, okay, that's unusual. How did that happen 100 miles away? And it all heard at the same time, right? You get these people from all over, coming from northeast, west, south, coming and converging on, let's say, Mecca or wherever, Medina, wherever it is, right? And we were told, we heard this voice, and we said this, and he said it in our own language. And we've come to seek this person. And he told us exactly who this person was and exactly where to find him. And we found him there. That would have been...
The other thing I want to point out is that a lot of people find this impressive if there's a long list of names. But why would you put there Abu Bakr as-Siddiq? What is the significance of putting Abu Hanifa, Abu Sufyan? Why would you put like meaningless names, a list of names, and then say, well, they all wrote it down? Well, where is what they wrote down? Where is this text? It doesn't exist. So what you have is you have somebody who says, well, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq existed. We don't know why or how, but there's no evidence for this. He said, well, he existed and he did so-and-so, and he wrote this down, and he did this. What is the point of this if there is nothing, absolutely nothing, zero, that you can provide that will substantiate any one of these claims? This is the same. Christians do the same thing. I'm always amazed how people will come to me and say, yeah, there were 500 witnesses who saw Jesus as he ascended. I said, what are you talking about? Well, it says in the Bible, 500 people saw him. Well, this means that one person is saying 500 people saw it. Where are the accounts of those 500 people who saw this? They don't exist. So why should I believe if one guy tells me that 500 people saw it, that these 500 people actually did see it, when there is no indication that they did? The same thing we have here. We have a whole long list. I cannot check that any one of these did actually write something down. I cannot even verify that these people existed. So what's the point?
The scribes for the Prophet, who eventually established a school in Medina dedicated to teaching 900 of his companions to read and write. However, the dialect of the Qurayshi tribe that the Prophet spoke in wasn't the only dialect of the Arabian Peninsula. And as the religion was adopted by a growing number of tribes, they began to struggle with understanding the Quran.
How is that possible? How is that possible? If you have one language in the Quran, which is supposed to be pure Arabic, and then you tell me that a God brings down a Quran in one dialect, without going into the standard version of the language, which didn't even exist at that time. And then you say, well, this God didn't really know all these dialects, so the people didn't understand them. So the God, now get this, the God has to adjust to the dialects of the people. So he has to bring different versions of the Quran to go and accommodate the people and their dialects. Instead of teaching the people Arabic and having one language that they can then read and understand the Quran, he has to go and change his book to match the dialects of the different people. Come on, guys, pull the other one. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we wouldn't expect that, right? We just wouldn't expect. There isn't an expectation that the message is sending down, even to the people around you, right? To the people around you, that's where the expectation would be the highest. Because those are people that all speak a similar language. Maybe it's like speaking a bit of, Queen's English down in London, and the northern version of the tongue up in the UK, which is a very small island where the difference in dialect is quite tall. They all still speak English, but the pronunciation of the words is different in 100 miles away. But you can still get a very good idea of that. But they're all, well, hopefully they're all taught to read the same English. The fact that they then go off to slang, is just part of their culture of whatever part of the UK they come from. But again, what would we expect, right? this message to be sent out to the entire world. Again, why would you need messengers? Just send obelisks out around the world that are there from the beginning of Abraham, let's say. Of course, he wasn't the first man or whatever, or even close to the first human, but let's assume that's roughly 6,000 years ago. Then you'd expect to see these black obelisks all over the show. That's what I would expect, because now the message is in a central location. It's untarnished, untouched, unbreakable, and can be understood by all the tribes in their own dialect, and it all says the same thing. That would be impressive. That would be evidence in favor, right? Instead, what do we get? The exact opposite. What we would expect. Some people making stuff up, and then different people around the world making their own stuff up. And if you cherry pick enough, if you squint your eyes enough, you'll find some similarities, and you can hone in on the cherry pick things. But if you look at it wider, if you look at it more generally, more broadly, you find that they all disagree with each other. So you have to squint in and find one or two things and go, they all talk about some sort of God. And by God, I just mean some generic thing that's not human. And then I can pat myself on the back. Well, why did you make it as broad as possible so that it can incorporate your very low standards, when we, again, can expect to have a much higher standard that mentioned Muhammad as the last prophet. And even if the tribes didn't know, they would know where to find this person. And in time, because God knows all things, we would all come to find these obelisks, and they all point towards Mecca. They'll all talk about this last messenger. That would be impressive. Now you would have me seriously considering that something more than human is going on here.
What is quite funny is we are always told that the messengers got the message from God. We are never told how. We're never told, well, God gave the messengers the message in this way and couldn't do this for the rest of the humans, because these messengers were human beings. Now, if they got the message, why didn't the others? And why are we never told how the messengers received the message? And if the message...
where these messages are, right? I asked Muslims this, or a couple of them, but those messages have become corrupt. Hang on a moment. So this 124,000 messages have had corrupt messages. What the hell was the point of that then? If that can't stand the test of time, what was the point? Just use obelisks. Get rid of the middlemen who are obviously very crap, or the people are very crap. Just put the obelisk down there, and we can then go and appeal to these all around the world and say the same thing. Whether I appeal to the one in South America or the Middle East, I touch it, it says the same thing. It's made of a substance that no human can ascertain. It stands the test of time. It's impregnable. And I'm going, wow, this is impressive.
This God, I mean, please, God gives the message to Moses, and this fails. Then he tries again, and he hasn't learned anything, because now he gives it to Jesus. Well, that fails. So then he says, well, let me try again, but he doesn't learn anything. He gives it to Muhammad, and we're always talking about the same message, okay? He gives it to Muhammad to have the message now. This fails, because we have 15,000 different interpretations of what has happened. So what he has to do is, after he sent this to Moses, to Jesus, and to Muhammad, he has to now send messengers to correct the message that he has sent to all the others. So he sends out 123,000 messages, or is it 124? 124,000 messengers to the different people. Where, when, how, and to what areas, we don't know. And we don't even know what the message was that they conveyed. This also failed, so he couldn't even fix it with sending 124,000 messengers with the message. So now he has to go and get the people, the scholars, to interpret the message that he gave to everybody. And now the people are saying, well, we follow the scholars. But because the scholars disagree with each other, you now have different versions of Islam, like, I don't know, 8,000 or something. And everybody says, well, we have the right version of the Islam. We understand it because we are following the right scholar. What kind of a path of failure is this? It shows the incompetence and the lack of any kind of knowledge of what is going on. If you look at the story, the way that the Muslims, the standard Islamic narrative, the way that this is constructed. Come on, please, guys. Just be just a little bit rational. Just follow. Just look at the way you are being taught this stuff.
Even if it was not as good as I thought, I put it forward, we should find some remnants of these messages somehow in caves or in parchments or something else in other places, because the Middle East was by far not the most advanced place in the world. The Chinese had paper before them. The people in the Middle East even knew what paper was. and going back in time. And there's many other advanced civilizations way before that that have recorded things. It's funny that they've never recorded anything to do with Muhammad or Allah, right? Again, unless you squint your eyes and go, oh, well, the sun, well, maybe we can interpret the sun as Allah, and maybe we can interpret these people as Muslims. Well, hey, once you start to do that, well, then anything can mean anything. And then nobody takes you seriously anymore. But what we would expect, if this were the case, is we would find, you know, as I say, remnants all around the world, all pointing to Mecca, all talking about this last prophet, all making a name that in the language of the people meant Muhammad. And we became, okay, this is unusual. You know, look, we date this back 6,000 years even before Muhammad. It was predicting Muhammad in the middle, you know, in the Middle East at this particular time, etc., talking about this God, talking about specifics of Islam that no other religion talks about. Again, that would be not as impressive as the obelisk, but more impressive than what we get, which is virtually nothing anywhere else in the world, especially if all these messengers went out, right? So that's evidence against the claim. Evidence of absence is evidence. Absence of evidence is evidence of absence when we would expect to have evidence.
Yeah. And in this case, it's very easy. I mean, all you have to do, I mean, everybody knows that there's the Hafs and the Varsh version. There are different versions of the same book. They are different. So to come and say, well, the Quran is unchanged, not a single word has been changed in the last 1400 years, that's ludicrous. I mean, it's so easy to debunk that. There are 5,000 differences between the Varsh and the Hafs, the main versions. And within the Hafs version, we have, like, how many was it? I think 100 different versions, 100 different Qurans. Exactly. Pyramids are much more impressive. That's exactly the point that Rob is making. You know, put the obelisk in there, take pyramids, put the pyramid everywhere you need it, put the writing on there. It shouldn't be difficult for a God to put the writing on the pyramid, to write the entire Quran on the pyramid, update it daily, and it's there for everybody to see it. It's so easy. You know, this is what would be impressive. This is what would be convincing. And yet, what do we get? We get a silly book written in a way that hardly anybody understands it. And then we have different versions of it with thousands and thousands, 100,000 differences between them. That's crazy. And then they make a video how to prove the Quran has been preserved accurately. And they're showing exactly with these different colors, different versions, different understandings, different interpretations. And that's it.
To overcome this, the Prophet was given permission to teach the Quran in 7 of the main dialects in the region.
How can one guy speak 7 different dialects, and can you please show me these 7 different Qurans? Because a dialect has a different spelling, has a different way of saying things, and a different way of writing these things. Can you show me these 7 Qurans? You can't. So these are just, you know, unfounded claims.
Region, allowing the message to be understood more widely. But these dialects didn't really affect the written records.
I don't like, you know, it makes me so mad. It makes me so mad to hear this nonsense where he says the people couldn't understand the dialect because it was all, couldn't understand the Quran because it wasn't in their dialect. And then, did they issue the Quran in different dialects or not? Well, no, because people say there is only one Quran. So, what? This does not make sense that they are contradicting themselves within seconds.
As they were only different when the Quran was actually vocalized. So this was the state of the Quran at the death of the Prophet. Hundreds of companions who had memorized the complete Quran in 7 official dialects, all of which were considered valid ways of reciting the Quran, as well as an incredible amount of written records that were held by the Prophet's companions throughout Medina.
Where's the evidence that you had 7, that people had fully memorized the Quran at the time that Muhammad died in 7 different dialects? We'll wait forever. Carry on, Stops.
Verse within each chapter had been established by the Prophet before he died. But because each chapter functions as an independent unit, the companions had different ways of ordering the chapters themselves within the book as a whole. With the death of the Prophet, the leadership of the Muslim community passed to his close friend Abu Bakr, who was quickly beset by conflict on the outskirts of the now considerably large Muslim state. This conflict led to the Battle of Yamama, which saw many of those who had memorized the Quran killed. Many of these memorizers, known as Hufaz, did survive, but it highlighted the critical issue of preserving the entirety of the Quran.
Okay, none of this makes sense. There are several hadith which state the exact opposite. Number one, there was only one guy left who knew of one particular sentence in chapter number 9. The other thing is that there is the story of a scribe who said the best of all creators, and Muhammad said, yes, write that. And then the guy realized that he was actually contributing to the Quran, that it was not God's word, it was his word. And that's why he left Islam. And we have the Hadith, we have authentic, we have Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim Hadith, which say exactly this. So why are they lying to people? Why are they taking one particular version where we know another version saying the opposite exists? This, in my eyes, is silly. Then they're saying a God is incapable, and this is another contradiction, because they said the God revealed it over 23 years in exactly the way it was supposed to be recited later. So it was not sent down chronologically, but there was a sentence in chapter 60 which was transmitted, and Muhammad knew exactly that this was in chapter number 60, and then there was a sentence from chapter number 2, so he knew this one, and this was exactly how it was revealed, so that Muhammad knew this. And here now they are saying, no, that's not the case. Everything is different. People rearranged it later on. So which version do you trust? If you guys, your standard Islamic narrative changes with the weather, with the I don't know, with the air pressure or something, it changes constantly what you are saying.
Which was in danger if all of them were killed. Abu Bakr decided to appoint Zayd ibn Thabit to compile all of the written verses of the Quran into one collection, using only those verses which had been written in the presence of the Prophet himself. These manuscripts would then be verified by those who had memorized the entire Quran at the hands of the Prophet. This was where the important concept of tawatur, or multiply attested sources, came into play. In order to be 100% sure that a verse of the Quran was in fact a verse of the Quran, it needed to have multiple independent chains of transmission from different memorizers of the Quran. In this way, any verse that came to Zayd could be corroborated through both written and oral means, essentially guaranteeing that every single verse put in the final book was conveyed by the Prophet. Once this had been completed by Zayd, he penned the completed text, which became known as the Suhuf, and gave it to Abu Bakr. This was now the official text of the Quran. With the death of Abu Bakr, it was given first to Umar, and then to Hafsa, the widow of the Prophet, when Umar passed away. Throughout this time, the religion had spread incredibly rapidly, now reaching from Libya in the west to Khorasan in the east. With this influx of non-Arabs who had embraced
Stop
Islam,
it there a sec. Yeah, he glosses over how it, quote, spread so quickly, doesn't he? Notice he doesn't tell you that it was offensive warfare, subjugating people left, right, and center. It's just spread as if it just floated over like it was leaves of trees or something, and they just, walked in and people embraced them and said, come and join us. By all means, subjugate us. We'd love to live under your rule because you guys are so amazing. They don't tell you about that, do they? So they make it sound as if it's just like they were just wandering around and just happened to, wander into all these areas.
Well, didn't we have this last week or the week before, where the claim was they liberated Mecca? No, it was a military offensive. What are you talking about? You see this a lot. We went and liberated Egypt. No, the stories that you get from out of Egypt, and these are written records where people complain about the brutality of the Muslims and how they were bleeding everything dry and they destroyed places just to find a bit of treasure. How Muhammad went and burnt a fire, lit a fire on the chest of a guy just to get some information from him where he hid the gold. That is what Muhammad did.
He was a really bad guy, Stops. That's what you do to really bad people, isn't it?
The 7 official dialects began to cause some issues. Variant readings are beginning to crop up, and in order to stamp out the issue, the then Caliph Uthman.
You see, they're contradicting it. I don't understand. They say it's preserved, it's protected. Allah is watching over it, that nothing can change. You cannot change the word of God. It's impossible to do anything. And then he says, well, it was changed. Different versions cropped up. How is this possible with what you said just a few minutes ago? It is the opposite of what you said. How can that work?
Yeah, especially if you've got all these recitation people floating about, and you've got this codified book now. Of course, he never said, if you look back in the video, it also talked about how the companions just put them into different order. Presumably a Muslim is going to come along and say, well, hey, these recitation people knew what the correct order was. Well, how did they know that? Because it wasn't done in the correct order. So all they would have been reciting was the order in which they received it, which is not the order that the Quran was ultimately put into at the end. We can't establish that anyway. So How do you know what order it is? But like you say, if these people were around, then surely this wouldn't have happened, right? Because they lean so heavily on this oral tradition. Now, all again, they're probably going to come back and say, well, hey, these were people that went off on their own. They didn't have recitation. Well, if they went off on their own, presumably they had a book. And if they didn't have a book, well, then it was obvious that at some point it's going to go wrong, unless they had a recitator type person with them. Well, then why would you let them go out there? Because obviously it's going to happen that they're going to start making mistakes. So again, it appears that God can't efficiently do this, because if there isn't enough recitators to go out with every tribe or whatever the case is, then it's going to start as it would do. And of course we're being very charitable and accepting that these recitators are like infallible humans in terms of memorizing the Quran, which obviously I'm extremely dubious of. But even if we granted that, there wouldn't have been enough of them to go around. So this is exactly the problem you're going to run into. But it wouldn't be a problem if they all had a copy of the Quran, right? That had somehow been perfectly preserved. But of course they didn't. Otherwise, how would this happen?
Yeah. Does reality match up with what is being claimed? Nope.
Man decided that the original Qurayshi dialect would have to become the official reading of the Quran.
So who decided? Who decided? Was this a human or was it God?
Was it Uthman, or who did he say that? I didn't hear it, but it was one of the cases.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, but this is the whole point. It's a human being that decides. It's not a God who says, "Listen, I'm going to give you one dialect."
But they thought of that one, Stops. But they thought of that, right? He's rightly guided somehow. Nobody knows how, but he's rightly guided because he didn't receive any guidance from God directly. So all they can claim is a vacuous thing of, hey, he's right. Well, how did you establish he was rightly guided? Oh, well, because other people said so, or he himself said so. Well, anybody can say they're rightly guided. How do you actually establish? What's the criteria for knowing whether you're rightly guided or whether you are wrongly guided? How do you establish that? So if he just made this decision, if I was one of his counsel, I'm going to say, how did you make a decision on the Qureshi one? And he's going to do one of either two things. He's going to bullshit me, or he's going to try and justify it. And then I'm going to ask him, well, how did you get to that, right? If he went through the Socratic process with us, if this guy's alive or we could teleport back in time, he'd have a very hard time justifying this in terms of, and I bet you he wouldn't even say that it was rightly guided. I made a decision because I'm the caliph and I know best. Well, that's just you claiming to might makes right. But that's not the Muslim claim, right? That they're rightly guided, somehow that God is steering them in some way. Well, how's he doing that? And what record have we got that actually happened? Other than them saying so or other people claiming to say so, because they didn't reveal anything new.
He appointed a committee of 12 companions to essentially repeat the process of Zayd ibn Thabit, gathering all of those primary sources, rectifying any differences, and confirming them with those who had memorized the text.
Rectifying differences how? How can it have differences if it's protected, if it's preserved, if it's guarded, if it's all these things? How can you have differences? What you are saying now that there were different versions of the Quran. That is exactly what I'm saying. And now these guys are confirming it. Congratulations.
Well, I understood the video to say that that the original was kept, right, with Abu Bakr and was passed on to his wife. So there you've got this supposed, perfect copy, the original version, so to speak. And all you'd have to do is open up the original, and then you could quickly see if other people had made changes. So why do you need a committee of 12 to do all of this? Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Why do you need a committee of 12? Because you've got the blueprint, the original document, and you just match everything else, or you just copy the original and say, get rid of the rest. Here is the original. Why have you guys gone over and made other things? You don't need a committee of this.
Yeah.
The only reason you need a committee here, Stops, is because that original has disappeared. And so now they have to redo the process they did before, and now they've got to try and get it and hope that it's the same because they don't have the original. If they had the original, this would have been certainly much easier.
He sent for the original Suhuf, which was still being held by Hafsa, and compared the two.
There you go.
Any differences?
Oh, exactly. Why do you need a committee? Just appeal to that one. What the hell is the point of a committee? Hey, I've got the original. It's in this, my equivalent of an Islamic, museum, or in Hafsa's house, or whatever the case is. Just go send for that. Why do you need a committee here? You've got the original. Everybody has to appeal to that. This seems like long-winded and roundabout. It's maybe, I'm just speculating, it's to make himself look important. Have this big committee make a big deal of this, but you've actually got the original anyway. I'd be asking, why are you going through all of this long-winded stuff?
Once completed, this final copy was read out to Uthman and the companions, who all agreed upon its accuracy. and they decided to burn the original sources.
But it was
in
agreed
order
upon
to avoid
before.
any
Why do they have to read it out again? That seems a bit
This
silly.
has so many plot holes.
future
I know.
divergence
It's like
with
trying
the
to.
text.
It's like trying to what?
No, carry on. Yep.
Okay.
Now, this text is referred to as the Uthmani Mus'haf, and it was the first written Quran to be sent throughout the Muslim world with accompanying recital.
Where are these? If this is the original and the original was copied, where are these copies? We don't have them.
Just
As
one
if
of
we
them.
have copies of the
Yeah,
copies
just
of the
one.
copies. Yeah, but we don't have any of the copies. We have copies of the
we
copies,
should.
but that's it.
Especially if it's been preserved, you would expect to have one of the copies of the original. Ideally, again, look, remember, we're talking about the most powerful guy in the universe. He's decided to do it in this obscure way, which again, we've pointed out there's much better ways of doing this. But if there's some divine purpose in doing this obscure way with different people in books that'll obviously get lost and torn and burnt and all the rest of it, and the best he could do is have the original book that's indestructible somewhere, that reveals itself. We can all go look. It's dated to that specific time, and you can see there's all the original writings, etc. If they were, presumably there would be some way of doing this to a high degree where you have the entire book perfectly preserved. Now that have a point that at least they've got an original book. Whether the book is true is a completely different story, but we're just talking about the authenticity of the book. Now every other book, you just copy it from that original book. That's all God had to do was keep the original book. Nobody's even got the original book. They haven't, as you pointed out, even got copies of the original book. How much worse does this get?
It's the same as the Quran we read today, with only one pretty big difference. It didn't include any skeletal or diacritical marks, which are essential in differentiating different words which otherwise look exactly the same. For example, this is the word for elephant, fil, and this is the verb to kiss something, qabbal. However, when you remove the markings, they both look exactly the same. This was how the Mus'haf was written. Now, whilst these diacritical marks weren't invented until 30 years after the death of Uthman, these markings, what are called skeletal dots, were known to the Arabs at the time of Uthman.
Okay, this is total nonsense. These are unsubstantiated claims. We don't know who and when the diacritical marks. And number two, they were not all invented at the same time. This is what this is insinuating. No, they were not. They were gradually inserted. Even the skeletal dots. I have photos taken from the Islamic Museum where there are texts without the skeletal dots. This is, and the funny thing is, if you look at the Birmingham fragments, you will see that they have skeletal dots, and yet people are saying, and even more, that they have some diacritical marks already, and yet they are saying this is from the time of Muhammad, and here they are saying, well, no, from much later, from 688 or something. So they're constantly contradicting. It's terrible.
But he must have
and please see, also got 267 CE, skeletal dots. The whole language did not exist. They were speaking like you had the Nabatean language, you had the Syriac, and you had the Aramaic. Those were the languages spoken. The Arabic did not exist. It wasn't even there in their dreams. Come on. You fool. Yeah, the Quran is preserved already. It doesn't matter how many Qira'at and Aruf there is. What is the difference between a Qira'at and Aruf? Can you explain this? The meanings don't change the legislation or creed. You're an idiot. Okay,
that's all that happens here is when you put pressure on the Quran like this, then they fall back to the oral meanings of this, right? Well, then just appeal to the oral and throw out the Quran, right? As soon as you put pressure on it, you want to go back to your fallback. This is like the Mott and Bailey thing. Then stop telling us that the Quran is perfectly preserved and just appeal to your oral recitations. Obviously, you recognize, as most people do, that people are not going to take that particularly seriously. So you want to have something written down. But when pressure is put on the written word, you just retreat back to the oral word. Well, then just stay with the oral word and stop talking about the written word. At least then all we have to do is put pressure on the oral version. We don't have to worry about the written word anymore. See what happens when it starts to crumble? They just want to retreat back all the time until they can't retreat any further.
Intentionally decided not to include them in his original Mus'haf. Now what?
Okay, here you can see, this is again the Birmingham fragment. And you can see not only Does it have marks? Like in between the chapters, there are markings. There are individual dots over the lines. There are all sorts of markings here already, which did not exist. If you look at the Hijazi script, for example, even the Kufic one doesn't have this. Here you already have them. And then, of course, what Dr. Dan Brubaker has shown, all the insertions, all the modifications, the updates, everything that happened to this text, this Birmingham manuscript has been updated, has been changed, modified, and you can see this. And yet, I don't know why they refuse to acknowledge this.
It even looks crossed out to me there. There's certain things that look crossed out and stuff there. Yeah. I can't see it clearly, but it looks like things are being crossed out or changed there in different colors as well.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you see my look at this here?
Yeah.
This already looks different.
What I was looking at.
Yeah.
We don't really know why. One possible reason is that he wanted to ensure that the Quran would always be taught and preserved through both written and oral methods. And that's where those official reciters who were sent out with copies of the Mus'haf came into play. Without these official teachers guiding them, students who studied the Quran wouldn't actually be able to read the text. But with both the written text...
Why? It's supposed to be written in pure Arabic. And if the language already existed, then those people should be able to read the Quran.
And an official reciter, the Quran was now completely standardized and able to be transmitted across the Muslim world. Over time, however, the usefulness of this approach began to diminish. And within the Caliphate of Uthman, these skeletal dots began to be...
So if it was not useful, why do it in the first place? Shouldn't a God know that this is not going to be so useful? What are we talking about? This is a God, for crying out loud. Why are these guys making their God out to be an incompetent, bumbling idiot? This is a God. You need to treat it like a God and not like some fool.
Be used in new copies of the Mus'haf. And this quickly became the standard for all personal copies of the Quran. So apart from the development of new calligraphy styles and publishing methods, every Quran from then until today has been exactly the same. And every Hafidh of the Quran has learned the exact same book by heart. That is a 1400-year mutawatir chain of people who learned the same book from their teachers.
They love parroting
and
this,
taught the same
don't
book
they?
to their students.
They just
and
love
we have
parroting
hundreds
it.
of versions.
But here's the thing, Stops. Remember, because a lot of Muslims are taught what to think and not how to think. And the more you repeat something, the more the gullible brain will take it as fact. Right? Because if it sounds authoritative, if it's repeated in an authoritative way, and you don't have any way to check this, people will start to take it as a fact. You see this happening around the world. It's the psychology of the human brain. It's especially effective in cults and so forth, where the leaders and so forth keep telling them. In the beginning, people don't believe it. But eventually the critical faculties break down and they just start to accept that they're either worn out or they don't have any way to recognize how to challenge it again. And so this whole claim that it's the same today, you'll hear the Muslims just repeat this as if they've all been in the same, sheep house, if you like, repeating the same thing over and over. And they'll repeat it proudly, as if they know it to be the case. And all they've done is heard somebody else say it, who they think is authoritative. That person's heard the same, and so on. And then they come and tell the rest of us that we need to take this seriously.
And then we take two Qurans, both in Arabic, we put them next to each other and show them differences. And then what? They close their eyes, close their ears, la, 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 and they will not look at this. They will not acknowledge this, even though we have the pages. We have the differences. We have thousands of differences between the different Qurans, and they will not acknowledge it. That is denial.
Which is why until this very day, we can open up a copy of the Quran and know with confidence that this is the same special book that was taught by the Prophet himself.
Ah, lovely story. Hey, I've also got stories I can tell you. The difference is I know that they're just stories.
But how
There's
they can...
a billion people or more that supposedly think this is a true story. That's the sad side of this.
But how they can convince themselves that this dishonesty is honest is amazing.
Well, they don't know it's dishonest, right? They've just been told. And to work out that something's dishonest, you need to know what the potential truth is or is likely to be, or show that somebody else knows that they're saying something they know to be false. Now, if you are not somebody that can ascertain any of those things, then you're just going to repeat what you've heard. If it sounds correct and other people around you are saying it, it's the same as how it's been, you look at whatever around the world. Same in China, same in wherever it is, where there's big cults, etc. People are told to tell on each other. People are told, here's what to do, and the next person watches the next person, and you get a level of psychological satisfaction because everybody's saying the same as you. So you go, well, it must be right. Look, everybody else is saying it.
Yeah, but then you get somebody showing you two different versions, and you can see the differences. What are you going to do with it? Close your eyes?
That's where the brain starts to go, shit, I don't know what to do, and that's where the psychological gymnastics comes in. And that, for me, is kind of the study of what do people say when they don't have a good answer? What comes out of their mouth? Because they're not going to accept, right, that they are mistaken or whatever the case is. They've got so many considerations, community, their life that they've poured into this sort of thing. But then again, it's very encouraging because there are many people becoming ex-Muslim doing exactly that, having the courage to recognize that everything they thought, the community of the people they believed, everything there is likely not true for whatever reason it is for them. Right, but it takes a great deal of courage, time, and effort, and sacrifice, because there's going to be some unpleasantness for most people that go that route. So I do sort of feel for them, but most of them won't do that. Sadly.
Yeah, I heard now that the number of Muslims is now estimated to be around 800 million, because they are losing like 2 million a year, and it's adding up. There are so many Muslims leaving, and there are so few left. And this safety in numbers or something that they are experiencing, or that this is their sort of the safety safe spot. This is no longer working. And now, I don't know, we've talked about this poll in Iran, where all of a sudden 62% of the Muslims in the Islamic Republic of Iran don't pray anymore. And 68.4, I think, percent no longer want Islam as the form of government. So they want a more secular state. They don't want the Islam, the Sharia, to be the basic concept of the government. 68 point something percent. I mean, that is amazing.
We can only hope that the majority of the youth are the way forward. Obviously, not everybody, but the majority. That would be, very gratifying if that's the case.
Come on. Even who was it? Hijab, Muhammad Hijab, he said, it's amazing how many are leaving and we need to do something. And Sapiens is doing this where Sources is trying to get people roped in again because they realize that they are losing people left, right, and center. They can't cope with it. There are too many things that are against them. It's reality that is killing the stories. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was critical thinking, right? Reading the Quran is probably another good thing to do.
That's the best way. I'm always saying, let somebody else tell you what the Quran says, and you can accept the Quran as of divine origin, or you can accept Islam. But as soon as you start reading the Quran yourself, automatically you're an atheist. There's no way. Okay. So then what remains to be done for us? There's no further questions. Thank you very much for the chat. How many atheists are there? No, sorry, that was too quick. How many atheists are there anyway? Well, it's the largest growing group. It's increasing at a crazy rate because people don't need the gods anymore, and they're realizing this. So the thing is, why would I go and say I am an atheist? I don't run around and saying I'm an a-dragonist, I'm an a-philatelist, I'm an a-racist. People don't do that. It's the norm. It's the standard. It's the zero position. And that is why if something is the default, you don't need to go and claim it. It's only when you deviate from the median, from the default, that is when you declare it. And an atheist doesn't have any book telling him, you need to tell people that you're an atheist, you need to tell people. No. But the Quran tells Muslims, you need to tell people. Christians are being told they need to tell others. An atheist doesn't have that. It's the default position. So why would I have to do that? I don't. So, it's a silly question. How many atheists are there? Oh, my God.
Alrighty.
What we have left is just
Hadith.
this thing.
And then we take a.
And guys, you need to
break for a
help me,
while,
really.
Scott.
Please help me, because there's too much. I mean, I think the crazy running around and the hectic I have, and at the beginning of the show, you need to come up with suggestions, because there's simply too much running around collecting stuff and putting stuff together. Help me a little bit. And help us a little bit. I mean, come on! It's not only me. It's not only Rob. It's not only us. It's you as well. Come on, make suggestions. Help us a bit. Narrated Abu Huraira. What was it? 80% of all hadith are running through Abu Huraira. Allah's Messenger said, "One prayer in my mosque is better than 1,000 prayers in any other mosque, excepting, of course, the Al-Masjid Al-Haram." So his mosque, what is his mosque? Now people say, well, it is Masjid Al-Haram, and some people are saying, no, there's another mosque in Medina. Which mosque is that? Why is it his mosque? And why would one bloke say, well, I am 1,000 times better than anybody else? What kind of a narcissistic fool is this, really? I don't get this. But whatever. There you go. This is the end of the Gin and Tonic show for today. If anybody wants to join us on Discord, then please go ahead. Yeah, we're thinking of taking a break over the holiday season, because we're not going to be here. So we'll have to discuss this with Mustafa and with Nick, and so if somebody wants to sort of sit in while we're on holiday, then please go ahead. Otherwise, I'll just be going on holiday. I don't know, some nice place. I don't know what nice places are left where you can go with this.
Yeah,
no
I think
COVID.
we just take a break, Stops. Otherwise, it's not going to be clear for the viewers, and say that, probably lightly back in September. And then people know they can take a Friday off from it, and we'll be away.
Okay.
I'll be away as well.
Let's take a decision.
Yeah.
Let's take a decision. So we're gonna leave August, and then
Yeah, we won't be next Friday either. Then, so we'll come back lightly in September.
Was it 3rd of September?
Yeah, something like that, I guess. We can let people know closer to the time anyway. Once we're clear on it, we can obviously put out, schedule a show, and people get it in their feed anyway. Then they'll know.
Okay.
And we can put
Then let's do it like that.
Discord.
All right, guys, you've heard it now. This is a decision that we've taken because I was unsure, Rob was unsure. So we weren't sure on how to do it, but let's take a decision now. Then we're going to take a break. And if anybody has ideas, if somebody wants to do things, then let's get a pipeline going. Let's get some topics that we can do or something. We'll see what happens. All right, guys. Thank you very much. This was Gin and Tonic show for Friday the 16th of July, and we'll see you 3rd of September probably. See you then. Good night.